Epilepsy warning for flashing lights and colors.
You know, I can't believe that it's been about half a year since my last Dark Rides video. Honestly, I think it's time for another one. Yes, just when you thought I was done with Dark Rides, turns out there are so many more to talk about out there, especially unusual ones. So for this video, I decided to take a look at 10 more strange Dark Rides that chances are you've never heard of. Now ordinarily I have people vote on the ordering of my top 10 videos, but in this case, since so little people have heard of these rides, I'm going to attempt to rank them myself, with each entry on the list getting progressively stranger as we go on. Real quick before we get started, I want to give a big thanks and huge shout out to the Dark Ride Database, who provided much of the footage for this video. Now, I've brought up the Roller Coaster Database, or RCDB for short, but did you know there's also a Dark Ride Database? This website catalogs pretty much every dark ride that's ever existed. From technical information to behind-the-scenes insights and interviews, there's plenty of material to check out, and there's always new dark rides being added to the site. Plus, their YouTube channel is chock full of incredible dark ride POVs, many of which are rarely documented. If you're a big fan of dark rides, I definitely recommend subscribing to them, so I'll put a link in the description, and I'll link to their website as well. If you love dark rides, DRDB is for you. So with that all said, let's get started. First up is a ride at Universal Studios Singapore. Now this attraction is called, and I'm not kidding, Sesame Street Spaghetti Space Chase. Yes, a Sesame Street ride themed to spaghetti and aliens. Now you might be wondering, who came up with the idea of theming a Sesame Street ride to spaghetti of all things? Well, as it turns out, it has to do with Sesame Street's New York setting. In a 2013 article on Yahoo Life, Universal Singapore's executive design director Kevin Barbie said that spaghetti was chosen as the main concept because it references the Italian immigrants of New York City where Sesame Street takes place. He said it, quote, relates well to the Asian culture because spaghetti is a type of noodle. So basically, the connection is noodles. As for the ride itself, it's an extremely creative, unusual, and visually stunning experience. As part of the ride's story, you're sent into space in order to stop an evil alien named Macaroni the Merciless from stealing the world's spaghetti and other noodles. It's honestly humorous to see that Macaroni the Merciless has its own page on the villain's wiki. And honestly, it's a well-deserved entry. If some alien tried to take my pasta, I'd be the first one to tell Elmo to go kick his ass. So the ride starts off in Sesame Street, and you can see the aliens abducting all of the pasta from the characters. And that gives us this surreal visual of Big Bird staring in horror as aliens suck up his spaghetti with a tractor beam. Immediately after this, you head right into space, and that leads to this extremely creative visual where the buildings are horizontal, giving you the illusion that you're launching upwards into space. So you, Elmo, and Grover go into space, and you have to follow the spaghetti to get to the alien ship. With the help of Abby Cadabby, you're sent into the villain's lair. Then you have this extremely odd visual of two cheese graters torturing Grover by pulling his limbs, rack style. Honestly, the more I think about this ride, maybe I should have put it higher on the list, but whatever. Finally, the Sesame Street Avengers assemble and successfully send the pasta back to Earth. And in the final visual, Elmo and Grover stand triumphantly on a pile of spaghetti and meatballs. But with all due respect to Elmo and Grover, I wouldn't want to eat any spaghetti that's been stepped on by someone's dirty feet. In all honesty though, this may be one of the most creative dark rides I've ever seen. It's got a great concept, and it's fun for all ages. Plus, it gave me quite a bit to talk about, so the algorithm's gonna like those extra minutes. Next up on the list is Snails and Fairy Tales from England's Great Yarmouth Pleasure Beach. Now you may have heard of Blackpool Pleasure Beach, but it's not the only pleasure beach in the UK. Where Blackpool Pleasure Beach is on the west coast, Great Yarmouth Pleasure Beach is on the east. Now as for the ride itself, you board a snail, as the title implies, and go through several fairy tale settings. Now what's odd about this ride is how shameless it is in directly referencing Disney movies. Now, just because a ride is based on a fairy tale that Disney also adapted doesn't mean that it's a Disney ripoff, but, I mean, look at this. That is clearly Robin Williams' Genie. And that's clearly Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. They even pull songs straight from the soundtracks of Disney movies. What's especially strange is that the very beginning of the ride doesn't really have any Disney references at all. There's this Jack and the Beanstalk scene that has no relation to Fun and Fancy Free, and there's a scene based on Hansel and Gretel, which was never adapted by Disney at all, as far as I know. Now, to be fair, I have no idea if Great Yarmouth Pleasure Beach got permission from Disney to make these characters in the way they did. Maybe because it's just one ride at a small international park, Disney would have to jump through too many hoops to sue them, and they figure it's just not worth it. With that said though, this ride is a surreal mishmash. Now it's time for number 8, Mischief Mansion at England's Flamingo Land. This ride is still in operation, and the premise is pretty unusual. Basically, you have these chibi versions of famous monsters, Drac, Frank, Spook, Yeti, and Mummy, and the whole ride is basically them just making mischief throughout a mansion. It's a family-friendly, very cartoony ride, with vibrant ultraviolet lighting and several sight gags. One of them, which is honestly pretty creepy, has Yeti shivering in the fridge. Then, for some reason, Drac and Frank put Mummy in the washing machine. And instead of looking sick or concerned, Mummy is just chill. Another section, named the Wind Test Area, actually has a gag that was lifted from Bubbleworks. Here, Frank is shown on a device that resembles a toilet, flatulating himself into the air. I'd be interested to know if this gag exists on other UK dark rides too. Later, you have an out-of-nowhere scene where Frank, Drac, and Mummy are using some kind of device to fling cupcakes at Yeti, who they've tied to the wall. Another scene, which may generate a hint of submechanophobia, has Drac sitting in the tub with a fishing pole and what looks like a shark swimming around. Throughout the ride, you get this pretty catchy tune that keeps looping and probably won't get out of your head. There are even more visuals throughout the ride, and overall, it's a charming and unusual attraction. Definitely worth giving a ride if you ever visit Flamingoland. Up next is number 7, Burg Falkenstein at Germany's Plopsaland, Deutschland. This place was formerly known as Holiday Park and is known for having the globally acclaimed roller coaster Expedition G-Force. But back when the coaster was known as Holiday Park, they had a dark ride that was, well, let's just say it wouldn't fly at a Disney park. Now, like many attractions at Disney parks, this is an Omnimover attraction. This type of ride consists of a constantly moving chain of vehicles that's always boarding passengers. According to the Dark Ride database, guests ride through a medieval castle spanning 2 floors. 13 scenes loosely depict the story of how the castle got intruded by knights of a rival castle. These scenes range from disturbing to flat-out odd. For example, one unsettling scene takes place in a torture chamber. You can see a blacksmith hammering a chain on a prisoner's wrists, and several prisoners reaching out of a grate in the floor. It's pretty messed up stuff. But then you have scenes like this where you just walk in on this woman who was in bed with this guy. Then you enter the king's court, and from the look of things, the king is watching the queen dance with a bear. This is especially odd because there was no indication of anyone being turned into a bear, so I don't know, I don't have an explanation. Then you see a guy taking a dump, a guy feeding a bunch of farm animals, and the whole thing ends with a fire-breathing dragon. Unfortunately, this attraction closed back in 2023, and it really is a shame because I would have loved to have checked this out. And not a lot of people have heard of it, so now, hopefully more will talk about its history. For number 6, we're heading over to Japan for Musical Circus, another defunct dark ride. This existed at a park called Shima Spain Village, or Park España. Now, I've talked about one of its attractions, Donkey Sherry, before on this channel, but it wasn't the only dark ride this place had to offer. Now, the plot itself isn't really that strange. In summary, you enter this enchanted forest, where the animals want your help to save their fairy princess named Alicia. She was kidnapped by a demon, and without her, the sun can't shine on the forest. So you go into the demon's lair and rescue her. It seems simple, but the way this ride is presented and its mechanisms are extremely unique. and the experience is pretty surreal as a whole. So here's how it works. There's a circular platform with multiple seats that can move through the show building. In the beginning, you're introduced to the animals of the forest, including the main character, a rabbit known as Pepe. This rabbit is voiced by Mayumi Tanaka, who plays Luffy from One Piece. As the ride's title implies, this is a musical, and he sings a song about the princess being taken. Soon enough, though, the demon enters the forest, and Pepe tries to help you escape. The platform then lowers down into another show scene. After a few ominous moments, the platform raises again, and you come face to face with the demon in a scene that I can only assume terrified small children. The demon, of course, has his own song, and he's even got some backup singers. This odd Hydra creature with multiple heads, and a cat with flashing eyes. In the lair, the princess sends you a message that she's been sealed away by the demon's magic. The platform then lowers again before rising into what resembles a Circle Vision 360 theater. Riders are instructed to put on their 3D glasses to defeat the demon. In the ride's climax, the demon actually swallows you whole, and you encounter 2 snakes and a dragon supposedly in his intestines. But with the power of your 3D glasses, you Thanos snap them away and save the princess. Alicia thanks you, and soon you return to the forest scene, which is illuminated by daylight. The animals thank you for helping in a reprise of the opening song. Overall, this was an excellent dark ride. It's not strange in a "this is weird" sense, but the way it's presented is surreal in a good way. It's like you're actually being transported into this world. The way Pepe is able to move around the set makes the animatronic really come to life. Honestly, it's a shame that a lot of the information about this ride is pretty hidden. I honestly don't know who made it, what the mechanisms were, what the patents were. If there's any ride worth researching the ins and outs of, it's this one. Now let's start off the top 5 with a trip to Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland. Here, there exists an attraction called the Scotch Whisky Experience. Here, you can experience a tour where you sample whiskey and learn about Scotch history, according to the official website. But up until 2023, there was also a dark ride involved too. This attraction, called the Whiskey Barrel Ride, is exactly what it sounds like, as guests actually boarded vehicles that resembled whiskey barrels. This is kinda like the dark ride at Hershey's Chocolate World, but instead of taking you through the chocolate production process, this takes you through the process of producing Scotch whiskey. The host of this ride is a ghostly character known as the Master Blender, and he takes you through each step of the manufacturing process. These include the milling machine, the washback, and this room full of colorful bubbles that represents the fermentation process. Surprisingly, there aren't that many videos of this ride online, and we're very lucky that the Dark Ride database documented this. I don't really know why it closed, but my guess is that it was expensive to maintain and not very popular. From what I can tell, the whiskey experience still exists with the tasting and the tour. There's just no dark ride, which is really a shame. Now let's head back to Japan for number 4. This ride is called Magical Powder, and it exists at a park called Lagoon Asia. No, the magical powder is not what you might think it is, but rather, it's a kind of fairy dust. The whole ride takes you through the world of fairies. The plot is that there's an elf festival coming up, but somebody stole all of the magical powder. So the fairies, with the help of a cat Sherlock Holmes, try to find it and who stole it. Throughout the ride, you go through several different locations, including the forest and underwater. Eventually, you find the villain, who resembles what would happen if Bart Simpson's hair grew arms and went insane. At the end of the ride, the villain is captured in a can of magical powder and turned into a mouse. Finally, the elf festival goes on as planned. Like musical Circus, this ride also uses an extremely unique ride system. Passengers board large cylindrical containers of magical powder. Each container is on a circular platform and is able to rotate 360 degrees. For the first few scenes, the containers turn towards the inside of the circle. In a way, it's kind of like Disney's Carousel of Progress, where each section of the circle represents a different scene. For the last few scenes, riders are turned outwards, allowing an all-new set of scenes to be seen. And I know that sounded redundant, but whatever. Now, the ride is already creative enough on its own, but what really makes it strange is the Halloween overlay it had in 2020. Essentially, they took the ride in its existing form and gave it an extremely creepy overlay. The ride now focused on a possessed doll named Mimi-chan. For each of the scenes, the original soundtrack was disabled and replaced with a foreboding one. Also, the lighting was changed to be scarier, and drawings of Mimi-chan's face were plastered on some of the characters to add a sense of dread. It was, for all intents and purposes, like a real-life creepypasta. In addition to a creepy doll being put on the final scene, scare actors were added to the ride, dressed up as Mimi-chan. These actors wore terrifying masks that covered their entire heads. Interestingly enough, the concept of this ride was created as a way to make a COVID-friendly haunted house experience. With the actors' entire heads covered, it prevented them from spreading the virus to guests. To put it simply, this overlay was flat out genius. And I recommend checking out the full video in the description. For the bronze spot, we're heading to Austria's Wiener Prater. This ride, named Geisterbahn, was labeled by Diary of a Roller Coaster Girl as, quote, "so bad it's funny." Now, Geisterbahn is German for ghost train, and really there's no story to this ride, as it's just a collection of scares. But what makes it stick out from other ghost trains is the placement of the scares in the middle of the track. You actually have terrifying monsters pop out right in front of you before the cart pushes them out of the way. And this happens several times throughout the layout. But these aren't the only things worth discussing about the ride. There's also this rudimentary jump scare, where the cart hits a piece of wood that pulls a string, causing a monster to rise out of bed. Afterwards, there's this extremely effective illusion that looks like you're about to cross a bridge, when all of a sudden, the bridge seems to collapse, taking you down. The Dark Ride database actually has a behind-the-scenes feature that explains how cables are attached to the rails to pull off this illusion. I'll leave a link to that in the description too. In all honesty, this ride is pretty effective, and it has some pretty gruesome visuals. For example, there are these two characters. They kind of resemble a melting dwarf and a possessed Dr. Seuss character. There's also the most goofy-looking vampire I've ever seen. This ride has no cohesion, but I'm gonna be honest, it's kinda awesome. Now for the silver spot, Kummitusjuna at Finland's Nokkakivee Park. Now, Kummitusjuna is Finnish for ghost train. But this ride is more than just standard ghosts, because it's got some weird imagery in it. Literally, the first thing you see is a giant clown head on the wall with a skeleton on the left and a coffin on the right. Heading inside, you've got a couple of skeletons on the left, and in front of you is a ride vehicle with a gentleman in a plaid suit jacket. Oh, and there's also a bucket with what looks like a head, a foot, and a finger in it. Next to the guy in the plaid suit is a clown in a robber mask and a biker with a gas mask on, looking like something out of a Mad Max movie. I can only assume the guy stole the clown's outfit. Next up are more skeletons, including a dinosaur skull, and some pictures of clowns and a clown grim reaper on the wall. On the right is a decapitated clown head and a two-faced, one-headed clown head. Oh wait, no, that's three faces. Next is a bit of a graphic scene where apparently this dentist in a hazmat suit drilled through this guy's face, exposing his teeth. Immediately afterwards, there's an albino Oompa Loompa with a skull collection. And, well, random stuff. And is that a knockoff of Freddy Krueger, half-bodied with a chainsaw? Then there's some gory imagery, which I don't want to take my chances with YouTube on. The classic guy in an electric chair, and Dopey doing something. I will say, this skull jukebox is pretty cool. I'm really having a hard time describing this ride. I have no idea who came up with it, and honestly, I gotta give them credit. I think they went all out in being as unhinged and weird as possible, and I love them for it. One of these days, if I ever get around to going to Finland, I gotta check this out. Now for the number 1 spot, Wonderland at Japan's Musashino Village. Honestly, I had a hard time between the placement of this and the previous entries, so I guess you could say you can interchange them. But what makes this weird? Right off the bat, look at this. First of all, you got these tiny ride vehicles with Egyptian death masks in front, and with the exception of a death mask near the boarding station, none of this ride has to do with Egypt at all. Also in the boarding station is an animatronic band that looks like they came out of a bad Five Nights at Freddy's ripoff. So when you start the ride, you head down this corridor, and at the end are, well, 2 goats and a painting of a kid putting up framed butterflies on the wall. And there's also a painting of Godzilla or a T-Rex or something bursting through the wall. Then you turn right and you see what might be the 7 dwarves or might be garden gnomes glued to the wall. Following this is a crude underwater scene with, I think that's supposed to be a fish with human legs and a sunken ship in the background. Then at the end of this corridor, there's a jump scare with this creepy looking doll. And there's also Christmas decorations and Geppetto? Wait, is this supposed to be Pinocchio? Well, there's no time to answer that question because right afterwards are the Wizard of Oz cardboard cutouts and Cherub Mount Rushmore. Oh, I think that's Ariel from The Little Mermaid, but anyway. A rock laughs at you, there's a castle, an alien, a propeller, and that's it. That's the whole ride. I don't think we'll ever know what the backstory behind this ride is, and that's truly special. I just love finding out about rides like this, and it makes me curious how many more bizarre, unhinged, and unbelievable dark rides there are out there. So this is a pretty odd note to end on, but such is the world of dark rides. Now it's time for the comment shoutout program. This is where I take 5 random comments from my previous video and read them out. These comments come from my video on insane water slides you've never heard of. Magical Reality 13 says, absolutely cool to see Journey to the Center of the Earth and Waterworld on here. Lots of nostalgia for that one, but what the video doesn't show is that you have to haul that tube all the way up to the top, up the incredibly steep hill the park is built on, lol. Michael Myers B1X says, I recently went to Hurricane Harbor in Texas. I think you should do a review of the park in Arlington. P.S. I love your channel. I love theme parks and I am only 11 and love intense coasters. Thank you, Michael. Davey Twee says, time for some good old TPC. Thanks, Davey. Soul Kibble 1466 says, I've actually been to Blizzard Beach. It was pretty fun, though I refused to go down the tallest slide because of my acrophobia. And Cosmic Champion 97 says, so happy to see Waterworld mentioned in one of your videos. Easily my favorite water park in the States. If you want to see your words in my next video, leave a comment down below and it may be selected. Please note though that inflammatory or spam comments will not be read. Thank you all so much, and I will put a link in the description if you want to support me on Patreon.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on social media on Instagram and Facebook, or you can check out my website at themeparkcrazy.com.
And I'm on TikTok.
This is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all next time.